Hello, this video hopefully will explain how to use the pattern I sent to people on how to make those train up a child baby blankets. This is the top. You really need to go from the bottom. You have to chain 121 stitches, that's explained right there. Slip one stitch and single crochet at the end of the chain, and you do that however long you want this bottom to be. You can put more spaces in between where I have them already. So that's up to you how big you want and what yarn you're using. If you're using thinner yarn, you may want to do that and do a different type of spacing. Now the X's, you'll see X's, V's, and yeah, X's and V's. The V's are, if you know what a popcorn stitch is, or a puff stitch, however you want to call it, look that up. Normally you end up with the original loop and 8 loops. The V, you would end up with 2 less loops. So with the V, it's a 6 loop. So it's a little smaller puff stitch. So, but if you're doing 3 with the X's, and you need to do 2 with the V's, or just something less than the, because it's right next to each other. And I've just found that it just looks better if you do 2 X's, that it just ends up being too big together like that. But what you do is the first line, starting at, this is the back. So you oh god, I'm not sure how to explain. Okay, so you do, let's say you chain, you do the first row after you do 121 chain stitches, then you do a row of single crochet, and then you do a row of another row of single crochet on top of that, and each even number is the back. Now these are all, the numbering is all the back stitches from the back. So when you finally get up here, the first one after you're doing it from reverse. So here's the blanket, and when you're crocheting, excuse my bad videography. Scared me, sounded like it was in here. Here's the front, this is the dip part, but we're going to go to the back of this. And because it's kind of a point, this is the back of the P, we can do a smaller stitch to make it look like you went off the page, but you're going backwards. So when you get to this row, you're going to count. Whoops, I just messed up. Okay, anyway, I just won't save it. So that's 10, and the lines denote every 10 spaces, every 10 stitches. But that's not a stitch, it's just telling you that, okay, that's 10. So instead of having to count, there's 10, 20, 2 single stitch, then the puff stitch, however you want to do it. And you're just working from the back. So as you're crocheting your single stitch, when you get to that point, you do a puff stitch. And there isn't any more puff stitches on that line. So you do that and come back, and then when you get back, you do that until you get to the back of the 8 row from the back side. Okay, let me state it that way to not be any more confusing than I am. And then I would do 8 single stitches, then a puff stitch, single stitch, puff stitch, single stitch, then 3 single stitch, then a puff, single, puff, single, single, single. I hope that makes sense. And you're working from the bottom up. If you're not, like a lot of times I'm watching TV or talking or doing something else, when I'm crocheting, I rarely just sit there and crochet in silence. I'm listening to a book, watching semi-watching a show because I can't do this without looking. I have to turn it around every couple of rows of doing lettering and making sure I have it lined up. If I didn't have this one in the right place and I ended up doing, like if this stitch was one space over, this is going to be a bigger gap. And you see what I mean about this would be a V, a smaller stitch, and a V here too. That's the way all the letters that can come back to itself, like this A, that's a V on the front, and the R also. And if you don't get this R in the right place, I mean, you can. I have fudged certain things over time, and they made things more interesting. I started making that a V at the top of the T. So just make it a little smaller. But you're working, when you're crocheting, if you do a puff stitch on this side, it would be on the other side. You wouldn't see it. You would see this. So this is why you're working from the bottom up, but as you're crocheting, it is in this order. So you're crocheting from this side, going left to right, but over here you're actually going right to left. So does that make sense? I don't know how to do a better video explaining how this pattern works, but this is how the pattern I originally had blocks of all puff stitches that were like a crisscross, and then each had a capital letter of the alphabet, A to Z, and it was a baby blanket pattern, and I enjoyed it, but I decided I wanted something else, so I played around and made these. You have to print it out with a non-true type text. True type text, like an I takes less room on the line than a W. A W will take much more room. Here on a non-true type text, each letter takes the same amount of space. And I did the dashes because it's hard to count blank spaces. So, and over here, these are just a reminder that I need to single crochet 8 before I get to the puff stitch. And over here, it's 14 before I get to the F. Let's see. In here, I didn't need to put that because that's 10 right there. 8 there. I know that there's 5 in the middle of M's and N's. A lot of times I know that, I already did this line, so here's the X. I did a single crochet over the puff stitch, and then I do a puff stitch next. So, you're working from left to right here, but on the blanket, you're actually going from right to left. Questions below. Sorry I didn't get this video up sooner. Be a blessing and be blessed.